Here are the top 10 climbing performances in 2022. Thermonuclear attacks abound, crazy watts, and some historical performances in a historical year. How we've done this is all based on estimated watts per kilo, normalized to be a 60 kilogram rider. All the details of the assessment is in the article attached to this video, but altitude, heat, all those factors are taken into account subjectively, how difficult the stage was beforehand, and that's how we've put together our rankings. Some honourable mentions from the Giro: Santa Cristina, Landa, Hindley, and Carapaz just missed out on the top 10. Guerrero at Mont Ventoux Challenge, a great 1 hour performance. Moreira, Glass Drive, spectacular performance at Jornal Noticias. He destroyed that race, as well as Vine on Funquaya. There's a lot of honourable mentions that would have made the top 10 in any other year. But number 10 in the Tour de France tune-up for Jumbo-Visma with their climbing squad: Kruijswijk, Roglic, and Vingegaard. They had Solaizon, about the same distance and gradient as the Grenon climb, just not to high altitude. Kruijswijk ruined everyone, set a hard pace on the climb before Vingegaard attacked. Very hard 2-minute surge, and even seemed to have put Roglic under difficulty, with O'Connor coming back a little bit later, doing about 6.3 watts per kilo for 35 minutes. He'd go better than that on Altacam and Grenon in the Tour de France, but an omen of things to come, seemingly riding within himself at number 10, Jonas. And here's the only Giro inclusion. Giro watts always a little bit lower, it's earlier in the season, but a big performance from Hindley, of course, to win the Giro. We had to include it on Passo Fedaya. It was a high altitude stage with Pordoi, San Pellegrino. It's at the end of 3 weeks. The time gaps are huge. So even if you look at comparative Vuelta performances, it doesn't look as good. This was a huge performance. Ineos paced inexplicably hard at the base of Fedaya, setting up Hindley perfectly, who bridged across to his satellite rider, Leonard Kemna, up the road, and the time gap's over a minute on a 20-minute ascent. The steep part of this was about 20 minutes. So a huge performance from Hindley, who'd been sitting behind Carapaz by about 3 seconds. And you win a stage this hard with this time gap at the end of 3 weeks to win a Grand Tour, has to make the top 10. So 9th, Jai Hindley, winning the Giro after 2nd in 2020. Here's number 8, the much hyped, much heralded performance by myself, I might add. Tour of Norway, the greatest ever race pre-Tour de France, the Galstertoppen, Stavsro climb, and Evenepoel and Vine went absolutely bananas on this stage. And listen, it wasn't that easy beforehand. There was these crosswinds at the top of climbs. Ineos kept trying to use them. Then EF paced with Healy, and I think Shaw for Chavez at the base of the climb. Vine attacked, very similar to Pico Hano actually, but unfortunately for him, this time Remco could reel him back in, and they did huge numbers on this climb. It was perfect conditions. It wasn't as hard as like that Giro stage or the crazy Tour de France stages, of course, and the temperature was much more suitable to high-level performances. We measured it to the end of the steep section, not this rolling plateau, but huge watts are huge watts, and the watts never lie. And Remco and Jay Vine certainly showed those watts weren't a one-off in the Vuelta later on. Number 7, speaking of the Vuelta, Les Preres, the main Rampas Inhumana stage of the Vuelta. 15-minute hard effort after a technical run-in where Alaphilippe was invaluable for Remco, who was able to start forward. Unlike Ayuso, he just rode everyone off the wheel. He even rode this asymmetrically. I think if he was doing this solo, he wouldn't have ridden it like this, but he was trying to crack Mas and get rid of... He saw Roglic was behind, so he just kept the pressure on, and everyone went over their limit. 18%. This is a ridiculously steep goat track. Again, the stage was pretty warm, decently difficult beforehand, and you see the time gaps for a first week 15-minute watts per kilo test. It's a serious performance from Evenepoel, who pretty much had the Vuelta wrapped up by the first rest day before that stage 10 TT. Here's the first Tour de France inclusion. Speaking of steep watt per kilo test, this is the climb to Mont, the Jalabert climb, 10-minute watt per kilo test, and this stage was hard and hot beforehand. Remember, 180 k's to go. Look at the top left corner, 180 k's to go. It's unbelievable watching what happened in the Tour de France, even now in December. Wout van Aert tried to get in the break, and Pog followed, and then Vingegaard was having to close things down in the medium mountains, and it was hard beforehand. Breaker eventually won. Micah and McNulty set a hard pace before Pog went on the climb. And the draft, it does matter. He did more watts per kilo than Vingegaard, who was in his draft the whole time, but Vingegaard looked like he was doing it easy, and Pog just tried to ride him off the wheel. No no real attacks, and then it was a stalemate. But the watts per kilo were huge. They were very, very close to the times of Pantani, Indurain, and Rees, and maybe if Vingegaard attacked, they could have broken that. But here's the next performance. He's only one on the list. Brandon McNulty on stage 17 of the Tour de France, the Col de Valoron Azé Périgueux combination. This was a huge performance from McNulty, who came good on the third week. He was good on the fast stage when he got in the breakaway, but the stage was hard beforehand. Jumbo over-chasing DSM, then on Orquet-en-Zizan, Michael Bjerg lit the race up, reduced the group to like 15 or 20 riders, dropping Adam Yates, so like 50 Ks to go before McNulty took over on the penultimate climb. It was a combination of two climbs, 20 to 25 minutes in length, 7 to 8.5% gradient. These are back-to-back. Short rest between. Perfect for Pogačar. His attacks were really strong on Valoron Azé, but Vingegaard was able to match him, and McNulty dropped Kuss, dropped Thomas, dropped all the other GC guys. And here you see, he almost dropped, I think, Tadej Pogačar. If he'd kept the pace up, if he kept out of the saddle here, Pogačar about to get on the radio maybe to tell him to slow down, and eventually the two GC big boys battled out for the stage, but McNulty did the best performance of that day. Super impressive stuff from the young American. Number 4, the only inclusion from a one-day race on the list. This is Classica San Sebastian with Remco Evenepoel. We've got the Haisgebel Erleit Murgil Tontora combination, and he goes on Erlites, which is 4Ks, about 11%, disgusting climb. EF again made it hard at the base, and Remco said thank you very much. Yates tried to stay with him for a bit, and this is the best, based on pure watts per kilo for the time duration, the best performance of the year. But it's in a one-day race. It's not, there's no Pog Jonas here. Watts are always higher in a one-day race. Remco's just come off, I think, an altitude camp for this. But it was the second last major climb. He still had to descend, had a valley, and then had to do the Murgil Tontora where, albeit struggling to get his sunnies on his helmet, he did a good time on that climb too. So this was a huge performance, and just like Vingegaard on Solaizon, this was foreboding of what was to come in the Vuelta after San Sebastian, with Remco saying, yep, I had to take those boys out back. This ain't nothing to me. And here he is. Well, here he is chasing Jay Vine. Pico Jano, stage 6. First proper mountaintop finish test of the Vuelta. 12Ks, 5 to 6%. Pudun was stomping this stage from the break. He got unlucky. This climb isn't that steep on average. And I know it looks rainy, but it was nice cool temperatures, and that's why they were able to do such a big performance compared to the heat. Vine attacked early and then got a bit of maybe a 30 to 25 second gap on Evenepoel's group, who then attacked the GC guys. This is number 3 on the list. Makes the podium on a 12K, 6% average climb. I never thought we'd see these gaps, and that's just because Vine and Evenepoel absolutely stomped this stage. Like, historic watts per kilo on Pico Jano. Vine's done the best part of 6.6 watts per kilo Etalon for 30 minutes. Just huge watts, his first professional win. What a way to bring it up. And look at Evenepoel's gap, like 122 to the Roglic group on the first mountaintop finish where the draft was really important. Big numbers from those two. Hold on, this is number 2. How's this number 2? Col de Grenol, 251, Vingegaard into Pogačar. That's right. It's number 2, one of the best stages I've seen when covering cycling, with Jumbo-Visma 1-2 attacking Pogačar at the base of the Galibier after Roglic had gone clear on the Telegraph, with Laporte bridging him across just over and over and over, then Pog responding on the Galibier, not wanting Kruiswijk, and Jumbo-Visma all staring down his neck. With Roglic dropped, he decided to keep the pace up. So they did Galibier. I think Pog did it over 5.5 watts per kilo for over an hour. That's a monster climb to high altitude, and the normalized would have been higher than that with all the attacks. Wout went back to collect Roglic, also collected Rafael Majka for the Col de Grenol, 11Ks, 9% to 2,400 meters. Roglic attacks, and Jumbo's domestiques weren't the strongest on this climb. It was Rafael Majka who set a hard pace of 6 watts per kilo before Jonas Vingegaard attacked with 4.6 Ks to go. He did about 6.5 watts per kilo for the last 4.5 Ks, so huge negative power split for him, and he's doing that at the point where the altitude is higher, cruising past Bardet and Quintana to take out the second best climbing performance of the year. And when you put 251 into the Tour de France champion locking up yellow, it's hard to beat that for number 1, especially with how hard and how hot that stage was beforehand. But here it is, the Altacam stage, Obisque, Spandel, and then Altacam, the historic finish. Again, hard stage. Or Bisk, they weren't walking up at McNulty, paced Spandell before Pogačar attacked over and over and over again on the Spandell penultimate climb, which is steep 10Ks, 8.5%. Kuss kept coming back, and then the famous crash on the descent before Vingegaard waited for him, maybe knowing what he had under the bonnet for that final climb where Bjarne Riis, I think, did the best ever climb performance in cycling history back in the 90s. Kuss, huge job, 6.2 watts per kilo in Altacam before Wout van Aert did a 2-minute super hard pull, dropping Pogačar, with Vingegaard doing Altacam at 6.3 watts per kilo for 36 minutes in the heat with all those attacks beforehand that he had to respond to, doing the last 4 or so Ks faster than Bjarne Riis in 1996. That's why this has to be the best climbing performance in pro cycling of the year. List your top 10 in the comments down below. I'm sure you've got a different order perhaps, or I've missed out some honorable mentions. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you with another one later in the week. Ciao.